You are creating, but at the same time, you are being created. You are being transformed by the art that you are creating.
Photography is curiosity. It's a mechanism of connection. Photography is our memory.
I think I am constantly looking at the world like a photographer, thinking about the shadows, like being entranced by them, wondering what would this look like as a photograph or as a frame.
The class did teach me to pay attention and to pay attention to what people say and what people don't say. There's a lot of meaning conveyed in the silences.
Everything I had learned at Duke and had studied kind of came together and coalesced. That was really where my education kind of became alive. I was 22 years old at the time. I didn't know that this event was going to anchor itself in history the way it has, but I knew I was witnessing something that needed to be recorded. This is the first photo I took. I think it captures what this protest and this community was about. This young lady was a ninth grader. She's wearing paper buttons that they made in an art class. The reason I like this image so much is because when you look at it, you feel like you're just standing right there in the mix of everything going on, which is what I think a photograph should do. A photograph should invite you to be a participant. There was a big meeting at Coley Springs Baptist Church, which is where everyone met before they marched. Most media professionals want to be up where the speakers are, but I was up in the back of the church. I remember just being overwhelmed by what I saw, and I just started shooting. I got photos that other people didn't because my focus was really on the community. I remember Alex talking about bearing witness, and I remember feeling like I was bearing witness to something and that I wanted to do the best job I could of capturing what I was seeing and that it be accurate. What I love about this photo, it really captures a lot of different emotions. Some people were more passive, others were very angry. The other thing I like about this one is that you see the North Carolina State Troopers in the background, kind of hovering. What I like about that is kind of the passiveness of them. And that's something that was very, very true. They were not aggressive in the way that you might have seen images from the 1960s. They were, by and large, quite sympathetic. They were really kind of secondary. On this particular day, one of the strategic approaches was to have young kids being arrested. The idea with the arrests was to lie down in the road to delay the trucks that were carrying the tainted soil. I was further back and I saw them all down there and I was like, oh my gosh, that is a photo I have to take. I was comfortable enough by then and had a little more confidence. I am running down, holding my little Pentax camera with a 50 millimeter lens. I turned around and shot that picture. people have said is an iconic photo of the protest. That makes me feel really proud. As I went forward as a journalist, my approach was to go where others aren't and find the story. And that was something I learned from Warren County.
In college, I never considered myself an artist. The word meant nothing to me. I wanted to be a zoologist and wildlife photographer until I met Alex. That class changed the direction of my life. This is the mother of the person who owned the farm. She was under my surveillance and watchful eye because I thought she was such a character. There's something kind of funny about this circular consumer producer of tobacco. You know, she's smoking kind of the same tobacco that she's growing. And so I'm crouched kind of behind the trailer, getting these tobacco leaves in the foreground and the background and trying to isolate a human swimming in this sea of tobacco. If you've heard of, minimalism, I'm probably a maximalist, so to have the world kind of filled with stuff and the frame filled with stuff. If you look through the work that I've done in the last, 35 years, that's one thing where I'm constantly filling the frame. In that class, and in my whole education and teaching, I come back to the form is what indicates the content. So here I'm using focus to really describe the tobacco leaves, to say something about the plant and the work that has to be done. This picture was me really experimenting with how you can narrate story through the formal attributes. This is the harvest. The season's almost done. Work wasn't that fast, so I actually made some portraits. Backlight is another one of those formal things that indicates and expresses a response that I had and I wanted to communicate to a viewer. After I graduated, I continued to photograph farming families and farm labor. I met the Orozco family, and that started a relationship that lasted several years. I got a very small grant to travel with them as they moved around the country and then back into Mexico. During that project, I started to ask myself, what am I really doing out here? Am I a journalist? Am I a documentarian? Was my photography directly helping anyone? And that paralyzed me. And so I did make a decision to put down the camera, and I just worked on the farm. And one time I was picking tobacco next to Eduardo, and he kind of dove under these tobacco leaves. The image was so powerful that I had to set it up. So I said, the next time you come down a row, hesitate so I can take a picture. I was really interested in the texture of his plaid flannel shirt and the texture of a tobacco leaf. Kind of like the history of textiles and modernism was winding through my head. Then I thought, oh wow, I'm really doing something weird now. I'm acting like an artist. So the meandering journey that started in that class sent me on this trajectory of what does photography mean when journalists, documentarians, artists use photography to examine social structures. And it's something I teach and study and avoid and also wade into.
There was never any question in my mind about what community I was going to document. I had this intrinsic sense of our history, our culture. Indigenous people have a long history of being subjected to extractive research and extractive documentary work. What I think is important is making sure that our intentions in going into this work is to focus on uplifting the perspectives of community members and celebrating their values. We come from matriarchal people, and so the heads of our families are women. And so it's just logical to me that many of the photos would be of women and would be of my elders. This is a photo of Aunt Lottie at the nursing home. She was always very put together. And one of the things I wanted to capture was a portrait of her. She grew up at a time when having her portrait made was a big deal. So even though it's clear from this photograph that we're in some kind of an institutional setting, you can see the handle of her wheelchair, there's still this air of dignity and formality to it. The idea to complement my portraits with landscapes came out of discussions in the classroom. I think is very important because you can't tell the story of this community, or in my view, any community, without providing that additional context of where that community is situated in the world. Robeson County is an agricultural community, and it was dotted with tobacco barns. This is a landmark that was known simply as the Red Barn. This was a time before we had road signs, and people knew roads by their informal names. All I have to do is say Red Barn, and anyone in my family knows exactly the spot that I'm talking about. This was early on a Sunday morning, and on a whim, I stopped on this bridge. The swamps and waterways of Robeson County are called blackwater streams. Thinking back on it now as a hydrologist who studies environments like this, I think I did a pretty good job of capturing a swamp forest. And this is the iconic ecosystem, and the swamp is an integral part of our community. In 2024, I published a book called On the Swamp, Fighting for Indigenous Environmental Justice. And I think there are inklings of my book in this project. It's about how Lumbee people and our indigenous neighbors have managed to not just survive, but thrive and adapt amid centuries of environmental change to our homelands. And this collection is an early version of that same idea. I think it's a tremendous responsibility to be a storyteller. This experience has helped me to be a better community-engaged scholar. And part of that process is being serious about the communities that we're accountable to and just being good community partners.
I was at a turning point. I was coming out of a very commercial phase of my career and trying to decide which subject matter resonated with me, which became the Southern landscape. A prominent memory from my childhood is passing through south of the border on the drive from New England to South Carolina to go visit my grandmother's home. And I just remembered it being like this fantastical place. And then in revisiting it, it was so run down and dilapidated. But there was something about the place that was speaking to me and all of its contradictions. This is one of the hand-painted signs featuring a caricature of the mascot Pedro as a hummingbird. The absurdity of these Vegas-style lights in the dark Carolina sky. And there weren't many actual flowers, so there was some deep irony. Spending time there was like being on a set. The animation are my memories, both the tension of past memories and the confabulation of like what could be. The larger metaphor goes back to the contradictions that are inherent in South Carolina. South of the border was like one of the first places to have interracial staff, but also it has this problematic imagery of Pedro, and then also being part of that journey that many African American families who were part of the Great Migration took annually. It is a marker of that journey that is held within this communal memory. I was evolving out of the south of the border work, dedicating my time to investigating my family's property, and I was stuck to an extent. Everything down to the foundation of my great-grandparents' home that had existed on the property had been taken away over the years. How do you visually represent something that's no longer visible? Alex and I were having a conversation, and he was like, you're going to have to find ways to go through the land, over it, under it. And I attempted every approach. And this is me having a confrontation with the land directly and putting my body within the frame. Then a shooting happened in Charleston at my family's church, and that interrupted my film because it implicated my family and implicated the community I was documenting. The film sort of took on a different tone and tenor, and it began to incorporate aspects of oral history, family history, and it became my expression of a personal and communal history of the low country of South Carolina. A full circle moment that made its way into the film is the scene with the projections. Those headlines started as screen prints that I made while I was at Duke. And then I later projected onto trees in Hampton Park in Charleston. Hampton Park was the site of the first Memorial Day, where African Americans gathered to commemorate fallen soldiers. And so to put these headlines from history outside of this historical site was a public intervention. Again, thinking about sites and meaning, going back to south of the border, and imagining what an attraction should be. This class tuned me into just this broader understanding of what is documentary, that deep inquiry into it, especially in thinking about the creation of public memory.
Thank you. Creation and expression has always been a big part of my life. At Duke, I decided to shape my entire major around documentary studies. During freshman year, I watched a documentary that only showed one picture of Durham, which was the gangs and the drugs and the poverty. The project I did in American Communities class was an antithesis to that documentary. I just kind of wanted to show the full gamut of Black life, which sounds so simple, but when all you have out there are negative stereotypes and negative portrayals, it's a big uphill battle. I knew if I'm going to tell the story of Black life in Durham, I got to go to a church. This series of photos really were some of the first documentary photos I ever took. I just didn't find them to be the most attractive photos. My ISO was too low. Sometimes they were out of focus. And I remember sitting with Alex, and he saw all three of the photos, and he was like, wait, put them next to each other. Look at how the story is being told here. And when you see the three photos side by side, they're so much more powerful together than they are separately. I think that helped me grow because I'm an artist. I love aesthetics. I love beauty. But when you're a documentary artist, you're a storyteller. And so the aesthetics sometimes come second to the story. Even now with music, I'm not going for technical perfection. I'm going for emotional impact. And I think that's what my doc studies training helped teach me and helped undergird in my artistic practice. The barbershop was an essential place that I knew I wanted to include in my project because for Black people, hair is very important in our culture. There's a Renaissance-esque quality to this that I like. He's seated in this position of almost like regality, royalty. We can be seen as gorgeous, as stately, as regal, even in something as commonplace every day as going to the barbershop. And I wanted to share that. I wanted to have a representation of a Black service member because Black people make up a large population of the military in this country. I kind of photographed him as he was walking through the grocery store, but I wasn't super satisfied with the photos. I didn't feel like they said anything. After we returned home from the grocery store, I saw that he had this poster of Muhammad Ali, who was vocal about his opposition to the Vietnam War. You have two different men, both Black, but in their actions, diametrically opposed. That is the greater message that's here, showing the full gamut of thought within the Black community. My senior year, I did a fellowship exploring race and religion through art. I think this is my favorite picture I've ever taken in my career. It was taken at the Oblate Sisters Convent in Baltimore, Maryland. When we entered the chapel, it was empty. I'd probably been in the chapel for 5 or 10 minutes, and I turned around, and there was this sister sitting directly in this beautiful path of light. I got on my knees and took it, shooting up, because behind her, that's actually a picture of Mother Mary Lane, the founding mother of that convent. And so I took the picture, I turned back around, and she's gone. It honestly felt like a very spiritual and intentional moment. The thread that weaves through my documentary work all the way to my music is storytelling. It's not about me, it's about the message and the vision. And I'm just the conduit through which that vision and message is being delivered. I always keep that at the core of all of my artistic practices, and I think that's why it's just such an easy jump from one medium to another, because the underlying thought process is always the same. I'm here to make you feel something, whether it's through seeing or through hearing.